to do her thing.
Sure.
So I'm Rick Sterling. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. These sessions, particularly I Am Canada Connect, which is what you're on today, is brought to you by all the Canadian ARMA chapters and sponsored by Western IM. We like to help as much as we can with the learning and education part of our RIM community. And so that's one of the things we do as a group. That's made up of each chapter coming up with at least one presentation per year, per ARMA year, and 4 for RIM month in April. And that gives us a full year of content, Canadian content for everybody to get education on. Really happy about that. It's worked very well and everybody's really excited about it. The precursor to that was a series called Learn With Us. As many of you would know, at the beginning of COVID, there was no education at all for the RIM community. So we Western IM, we took it upon ourselves to kind of put a series together of education and learning for the RIM community we called it Learn With Us. And we still run that too. So if you want to sign up for that and others, you can go to our westernim.com website and you can sign up for that. It's not a sales thing, it's a educational thing for sure. So that's the two kind of series. Donna is past president of the ARMA Edmonton chapter, and she's been on the board as well, and as I am as well in the Edmonton board. Donna, thank you so much for stepping up with for the Edmonton chapter as the first presentation of our ARMA year. So we really appreciate you doing that. Donna is a true consummate professional and also a longtime friend of mine. Really happy to see her on here to do this presentation. I'm going to let her introduce herself. One thing I will say, though, for all the ARMA people in the crowd is because some of the chapters are needing help on the boards, on their chapter boards, if any of you think you might want to get involved a little bit more than you are currently with your ARMA chapters, local ARMA chapters, please reach out to them. They would be more than thrilled to have you come forward and ask them about the ability to take on a board position maybe, or help them out in a committee or whatever you can do to assist in our ARMA community across North America. So do that if you can. That's all I'm going to say. I wanted to also quickly introduce Troy Sawyer, my partner at one of my partners at Western IM. Troy in his real job at Western IM is the director of development here at Western IM, but he also helps by setting up all these webinars and posting them on our website. We do post the recorded presentations for everybody to come and have a look at if you need somebody else to see the presentation today that Donna's going to give. So
I'll also be doing the next Learn With Us session as well.
Yep. The next Learn With Us session coming in October. The next I Am Canada Connect session, which will be in October, is a good friend of many of us, is Ken Oldmerger as well, doing a session at the end of October. So you'll be kind of see that kind of stuff coming out in about a week, I would say. You'll start to see that information coming out and so on and so forth. Learn With Us will be starting again in about 2 or 3 weeks, Troy, I guess. Yeah. So you'll also be able to see or get a reference to the Learn With Us sessions that are coming out in the near future as well. So that's it. I'm going to step away. And for any of you going to Houston, to the InfoCon conference in Houston, I know Nicholas, who's also on here today, Nicholas and I will be presenting on the Wednesday at 11 o'clock in the morning in Houston. And I'll certainly be on a panel at 5 o'clock on Tuesday as well. So any of you that don't know me or are coming to Houston, please come up and say hello, introduce yourselves. I don't know everybody, but I certainly love to meet everybody that's going to be in Houston at the conference. So thanks again. Donna, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you would do that far better than I would anyway.
Great. Thanks so much, Rick. So where I came from is when I actually was working in Whitehorse, I moved to the Edmonton area. And right away, I started to get involved with ARMA Edmonton. And at that point, we were running conferences here. So it was a great opportunity for me to connect with others and actually get to meet other people and get involved with the chapter. And one of the things I discovered pretty quickly is learning from practitioners and having a network of people that I could reach out to was just such an incredible opportunity. So one of the things is you just heard from Rick, come up to me, introduce yourself. That is very much where ARMA Edmonton does its best, where people have that opportunity to connect with others and build those networks and connections, because sometimes the only way to get really good answers to your questions is to connect with another practitioner. So I think that that's something that is often overlooked by the value of networking with people in your community. The one thing about our chapter now with Edmonton is that we are reaching out to various areas of the province. Rick has actually moved to Nanaimo, and we have people that are in Lethbridge area, and we have people that are joining us from northern Alberta as well. So, Peggy, you asked that question earlier, where we located. It used to be we were tied to physically meeting in a meeting room somewhere, and nowadays we're just virtually meeting, and that does give us different perspectives, and it does allow participation from a wider geographic area. So I just want to echo what Rick talked about earlier with that opportunity of getting involved. In terms of my introduction of why I'm doing this topic, I actually have a background where I was trained as a librarian, and then I ended up working as an archivist. And then what I found myself frequently doing is training. And I was tapped to do courses or workplace sessions, and then eventually ended up working in staff development. And I did the best I could, but what I really did not have is a solid background in adult education. So then I went on to get certification in that through a University of Alberta program, and it's known as the CASE program. So for anybody that does an awful lot of training and workplace training, I couldn't speak enough about the value of that kind of CASE programming. Some of it's available through distance training now. And that program has courses in it such as needs assessment, training evaluation, instructional design. So if you end up in a role, and it looks like a couple of you might be in those kind of roles, that kind of education of adult learning and adult education can really do a lot to help you be a more effective trainer. And similar to what I just talked about for ARMA, it was also great to be able to connect with people that were learning about adult education and were passionate about training. And I will never forget that experience and that opportunity. So I just wanted to make that plug. For me, I'd really only learned this material recently, and I regret not knowing about it years ago. So Troy, at this point, I'll have you bring up the presentation content and we'll start to go through the slides. And so I'm fortunate that Troy's going to give me a hand with this, and both Rick and Troy are going to also help with questions that might come into the chat. Now, at any time, if you have a question and just want to post it, please please go ahead. You don't have to hold them until the very end. And I very much would like engagement during this session to make sure that we're, addressing your needs as we work through this session. So this was based on a session that was delivered for the ARMA conference in Calgary that was held back in May of this year. I have cut it back so that we have more time for questions and for discussion. And that was not time we had in Calgary, but I certainly wanted to make it different for this group today. Next slide, please. So what we're going to be talking about in the time we have together is talking about adult learners, and they are different from a school situation where, when you went through school, it was a whole different type of learning than what we know about adult learners. And we're going to talk, and I'll have some information about the characteristics of adult learners that you need to consider as you're working on training for them. And this session is really going to talk about doing a needs assessment and what the benefit of doing a needs assessment would be. Next slide, Troy. So why this topic matters. When I see this young woman in the slide, I really thought that was me. I often felt like I was, hey, please do this topic. We're just asking you to do it. It's frequently a situation where you grab someone that's familiar with content, and then they're asked to deliver it. And, I remember feeling at the time of when that first happened to me that, I was focused on getting over being nervous or focused on the public speaking aspect of it. But I also realize now that what I failed to do a lot of was to really have that engagement and really have the ideas for how we could make it where people were participating more and less talking at people, less delivering content, and more having people have questions and brainstorming and various other tools and techniques that we could use for having them participate. And there was a time also where organizations were really looking at e-learning as a way that most content would be delivered. And as we took that adult learning coursework for the through the university, we were having many people join us that had like mandates to deliver e-learning. And it was sort of becoming the solution to every training was we were going to just do e-learning. And so we actually had great discussions about the value of e-learning and when it might not be an effective way to teach people, why you might want classroom situations, why you might want to try other ways of doing training and the various options for doing that. So this topic matters because to be effective in delivering records management in your organization, you want to be able to be effectively training and communicating what's expected to your users. And you want to be able to make sure that there's a consistency and quality in the work of what we're doing for our records management programs. Next slide. So to understand adult learners, one of the most important things to begin to understand is that they're very self-directed in how they learn. Now with the technology that we have available where people can work and learn remotely, we have so many opportunities now that weren't always available, but we also need them to truly be paying attention and truly to be getting the material that we want from the training courses. And one of the things that I really focused on when I was looking at training, and I still do, is I actually make a point of thinking about what's called transfer of learning. I want to make sure that when I'm giving content to the audience that's been identified, that we actually can know that when they hear that content, they go back to the office setting at their desk and they'll actually apply what they were taught to do. So the terminology is called transfer of learning. And this is something that any adult learning trainer is focused on is can we actually demonstrate change happens in the workplace by the training that we deliver. And that's an important part of the work that we do when we're developing training. Can we actually understand that the training is being applied and they're doing what we've asked them to back in their office? Next slide. So in terms of self-directed learners, they actually pull from a lifetime of experience. So if you're introducing a new concept and they've never heard of it before, you need to give them time to think about that and process a little bit. And it's also helpful if you're putting material together to make sure that you're developing material that kind of takes their experience into play. Now, from a point of view of training, what I often like to do is figure out who's in the audience and what experience they do have and where they're from. So when I'm actually trying to deliver training and develop training, I frequently want to kind of figure out the characteristics of that group and figure out, are these brand new employees being onboarded? Is this people that have experience with this content that we're about to deliver? When you know that they're going to kind of consider what they know from the past as you bring forward the new material, that is something to always keep in mind as you're developing training. They also ideally like to know why learning is important and why you're actually delivering the topic to them. That why questions of why am I learning this? What is the context? Why are we doing this? I find that why question is really important, particularly to an analytical group of people. And in my situation, I've often delivered training content to engineers and also people like accountants and others that are policy people that are very analytical, problem-solving thinkers. And in those situations, I really like to make sure that we're identifying why. Why are we delivering the training? Why is this topic important? Why is it something we're taking the time to do? Why now? Adult learners also usually want to apply the learning immediately, and this comes up a lot in any kind of software training. It will be very important to actually time training to deliver the training and then have them immediately start practicing it in the new system. So one of the best things to do if you are doing something like a SharePoint implementation is to always make sure that you're doing a schedule where you're timing it, that, you know, you've got the plan for when they're going to start using SharePoint, and immediately before it, there's the support and resources for training, so that when they're actually doing this, they're not regressing back to doing what they're not supposed to be doing, but they're starting to apply that training immediately to doing what they're supposed to be doing in this new system that you've just trained them on. The other part that's so important is they often like a hands-on approach, and they need the training to be relevant to their needs. Again, we're going to talk a little bit later about needs assessment, but it's important to see it from the point of view of your audience. Like, what is their needs and how are you targeting this training to make it effective? So in some ways, that's why generic YouTube videos or just generic content that people can search out on the internet may not be the effective way you want it done in your organization. You want to make sure that people are following the guidance that you've created within the place where you're working at. And in that situation, you're often wanting to make sure that the training is customized to the needs of your organization. Try the next slide, please. So characteristics of adult learners, how do they actually learn? Next slide. They often have a situation where timing matters. They're ready to learn when they're ready to learn. And I know that's kind of an awkward concept, but they need to be in a position where they're ready to learn the new material, and you know that it makes sense to them that this is the timing to learn it. They often seek opportunities to perform the new task or system. So they want to, many people are almost like that keen to just, let's get on with it. Let's do it right away. They need to be able to learn from their mistakes, and they need support when errors actually happen. So when something doesn't go quite right, or there's an issue or problem, they need support in that, and sort of a culture where mistakes can happen, but we learn from them and go on. They also learn best when it's familiar to them and linked to the concepts that they already know. That is an important part of the adult learners and the way that they operate. They like to have an understanding of the concepts. And so one of the things that jumps out to me, to us as records management people, when we say terms like disposition and even the concept of record, or, you know, throw around terminology like records retention scheduling, or we need to be aware that for the average person in an organization, those kind of concepts may not be understood or unknown. And a common example I hear is the word archive. I've archived those boxes, or I've archived this. And that concept for them often just means they put it away and it's not in active use. Whereas for those of us in this field, an archive might be an actual physical building where, you know, it's an other institution where records are kept. So when we actually are working on training, it's so crucial to make sure that definitions are clear, that they understand the concepts that we're talking about, and that we're making sure that they're engaged in that material, that they understand those concepts. For that reason alone, I often think that a precursor to training is establishing information governance and having guiding documents on procedures or job aids or other material before training. So to understand concepts, I think that's really important. Another characteristic of adult learners is they want the ability to practice, and they also want the content customized to their needs to be effective. Next slide, Troy. Okay, a needs assessment. Now, what I've prepared for you today, and I think that Troy's posted it in the chat, is a template for a needs assessment. And this was something that I found so useful for me. Thanks for bringing that up, Troy, is that when you actually do a bit of a needs assessment, then you kind of establish why are you doing this and what are your goals and how can you be effective. So the information that's needed for needs assessment, I've given you a template sheet, and there's sort of the start of that. And what I find is that when I get asking questions about what is the purpose of our training, what are we trying to achieve, who's the audience going to be, And so what are we trying to accomplish by this? I think that this has been fundamental for me because sometimes it's turned out that we don't go ahead and actually deliver the training. We figure out another way. We end up kind of going back a step and saying, wait a minute, what we now know is everybody has no clear direction on how to do this. And so we've gone back a step to say, wait a minute, we need a policy. Wait a minute, we need a procedure. We need to actually have a form that they need to fill out, or like it's turned out that there was something that was a gap that we needed to fix first, and then we could do the next step of training to communicate what was expected to the group. So this slide identifies that, this is something that we do to be effective in designing and creating effective training. And we also want the trainer to be able to make sure that they're addressing the group's needs. And so this is why it's such an important step for doing before you just jump in to start delivering a session on some kind of content. Next slide, Troy. So why would we do a needs assessment? I believe, especially for those of us that have been working in areas where there's not too many people and there's a lot of work to do to establish a records management program, that we will have a better impact if we take the time to do a needs assessment and figure out how the training fits into the overall program. And I think we actually can do a better job of training delivery if we actually have a clearer idea of why we're doing it and the way that we choose to deliver it. And this goes back to my earlier comment about sometimes we can't solve problems with training. So one thing that really is very memorable to me is when we went through the program, we had somebody from a private corporation that said that in many organizations where he had been, the first way that everything was solved was training. And he would actually repeat kind of a statement that he would be told, well, if we just train them, they won't do that anymore. That is actually not the way to get compliance. If there's performance issues, or if there's a situation where there's, lack of clarity of direction and there's no governance or policy, if there's no foundational steps done, it's very difficult for training to be effective and to provide a good solution for everybody to work together to, have that quality outcome that you're looking for. Sometimes a lack of skill or knowledge about a topic is not the reason that you're not actually getting the results that you seek. So this whole step of doing a needs assessment, it might turn out that it's not, training is not the way to go. It might be that you come up with other means to address the gap that you want to have solved. Next slide, Troy. So here's some examples of content that is, content that you would gather for a needs assessment. In the document I've shared with you, I put together kind of an area where you could just fill out the blank. Sometimes you're just being assigned to do the training and you don't know the answers to the questions. Sometimes you might actually have to speak to multiple people about what the answers might be to these questions. But, it's a great step to sort of gather the information and then have a better picture of why you're doing it. So one of the things that comes to mind is like, what are the objectives of the training? And I'll give you an example of where this came up for me. I was new to an organization and I was being asked to put together FOIP training. And when I looked at it, it talked about how to manage emails. And I thought, okay, this is actually FOIP training, and we have no way of actually managing emails effectively here. We're just using Outlook. And it was very confused and it was very unclear. And I never really could see a link between the FOIP training and why we were focusing on talking about email. So again, you go back to what is the objective of the training? If the objective of the training is to give everybody in the organization an overview of the FOIP Act and what to do, particularly customized to, when you get a FOIP request, what are you supposed to do? Then talking about email management is sort of like a side topic that's not relevant to the actual training. So what are the underlying issues? Going back to the email management training, one of the constant issues related to email management is volume. But if you actually don't have a system for managing email, it may not be the timing to actually offer training in that. You might be better off focusing on areas where you can successfully provide training and wait for a timing that would work better for rolling out a topic such as that. one of the very important things is to find out from employees where they are at in terms of the current state. So as an example, going back to the FOIP example, at the beginning of that role, I ended up kind of talking to employees, and what I found out immediately when I surveyed them about what they knew about FOIP is they had been told if they had any questions at all, they were to go speak to a named person. If I have questions, I'm going to go speak to so-and-so. They never were given any kind of guidance on how to actually solve any problems on their own. So the way they were channeled was, if you have any question at all, phone so-and-so. So that was kind of a situation it created a dependency on that person, but they were not prepared at all to respond at all or to be able to do anything on their own. So that would be taking a step back to say, do we want them to do something, and what do they want? What do we want them to do? So there was a consistency among all the staff that they all had that message, but they also were very much willing to be able to respond to requests and be clear on what they could release for routine disclosure on their own. The other thing to do is, what are the politics to be aware of? And where this has gone for me in this particular part of a needs assessment is sometimes I found out that the topic has already been delivered before. We've actually had training before on some particular topic, or it didn't go well, or it didn't actually, the transfer of learning that I talked about earlier, transfer of learning didn't happen. It wasn't effective, and now we're redoing it. Those are all politics to be aware of. And when I say politics, just small p, like what is it that is not maybe effective from how it was before? Did the senior leader who was involved before leave? Why is there some issues at all that we need this training? Linked to that is what has already been done. Have we covered this topic before? Has the audience that we're targeting, have they attended this training before? That's also really an important question. Now I'm discovering, as I work with organizations and we're frequently trying to implement SharePoint, I actually am asking the question of users, have you had SharePoint training? And I am pleasantly surprised at people who are coming from other organizations that have had SharePoint training, have been using SharePoint. Many of them are just saying they never were trained, but those are all kind of important things. Maybe in the organization that you're in, they've been trained somewhere else, and you just want to know that background of what's been done, because it might not be training that you delivered in your current organization. In terms of training, is there a problem that we can pinpoint that needs to be solved by the training? Is it just a portion of the organization that needs the training? Is it a certain work unit or business unit that needs to be trained? And what is it that we're actually trying to solve by offering that training? I love the question, why are we doing this? Because I think it's important to answer that question in the mind of the person that's asking for the training to be done, and the trainer needs to know that information so that they can be effective in doing it. If the trainer is separate from the person that's championing the training, they all need to be aligned on the same page that this is something that we're going to be doing. Who else do we need to talk to? Sometimes as you work on the needs assessment, you'll find out that there's people that you should kind of survey that are linked. In the world of records management, there's so much linkage now with information security, IT, risk, FOIP. It could also be, something linked with finance. So are there other business units or people that we need to really show that we're working collaboratively? That is a fundamental now in the way that we need to work together. And then also, yep, great, Nicholas. Yep, it could also be the legal department. Those are also really important ones too. So what does leadership expect will result from the training? That is something that's really important as well. Like, if, yes, we have people that are coming to the training, we've got great participation, but what are we looking for leadership to sort of see results from this training? Like, and it goes back to that transfer of learning. We want to make sure that it's not just we had people turn up for the training and take it. We want to see a result for the time that was invested in that kind of time for the training. Next slide. So ultimately, the training needs assessment needs to identify who is the training for, and can you actually pull out what are the characteristics of the participants that will be in the session. It's very helpful to identify the specific objectives you have for the training. And where that really does help you is if you then work on developing learning objectives for it, and there's lots of material out there on how to write learning objectives. It's so helpful to take the content from the training needs assessment to the next step of identifying the learning objectives. And then I also love to really make sure now that the training fits into the overall organizational plan. And that's an area that HR is often involved with. So, is there an organizational plan for training? Having been in staff development for a couple of larger organizations, we would have annual plans for what we wanted to see as strategic objectives in the organization. And, at that point, is there a training manager or staff development role in the organization where they need to hear from you of what your plan is? And that is a way of avoiding scheduling conflicts and overloading staff with too much going on at the same time, because those kind of overloading staff as they're trying to do their jobs creates conflict and anxiety and pressure on staff that's unnecessary if people work together right from the beginning. My fourth question on this slide in the black box is really important, and it's something that's been a hard lesson learned, is will this training be voluntary or mandatory? Now, maybe private sector organizations don't go through this a lot, but I've worked a lot in government, and seems to be a really common question that senior leaders like to look at, and then they like to designate whether it's voluntary or mandatory. And having been in roles where it was made mandatory, I never found that worked, because it goes back to the characteristics of an adult learner. It goes back to their needs as self-directed learners. It goes back to realizing that people might not fully understand the way that an adult learner works. By making training mandatory, I found that it always backfired. Then what it created was a prisoner in the room who really didn't want to be there. And then it took away from the learning of other people. So as I did the training with the U of A and the certificate in adult learning, we actually talked about this as, part of instructional design, that it was better to actually have someone who was a prisoner leave than to have them stay there and turn the audience into a negative experience for everybody. So we actually spent time on ground rules. We spent time on establishing learning environments. But this idea of having mandatory training where someone doesn't want to be there is kind of a fundamental that really impacts the successfulness of the entire training program by making things mandatory. So I think it's something to put some thought into before just thinking of it as a simple question. The questions on the right-hand side, when you're working on this training, I think it's also very helpful as you're thinking about your records program. What changes would you like to see happen? And what problems or opportunities do you want to see addressed with training? When you can get those kind of answers formulated, I think that it results in much better training than not taking that time to do this step. Now, when I'm talking about this training needs assessment, I'm not thinking about it as like multi-year, months of exercise to do this. It's just a quick analysis. Sometimes I've been had an assignment where, we want you to deliver this in 2 weeks. And so it's sometimes been forced to be a very rapid exercise. But I came to know that even for myself, it was helpful to take the time to do this so that I could do a better job of developing the training. I would have the fundamentals I needed to be more effective in what I was doing. Next slide. So I'd love to jump into some questions. Troy, if you could actually bring up that little template that we've got for the needs assessment, that would be great. Any questions that we can cover for people? I might need your help here, Rick, to jump in and get some questions.
Here, I can just bring up that document here. This is the document you like here?
Yep, this is it. So, I've got it where you can write in the training topic, you can write in the target audience, And then you can start to gather the information. And, you know, it's not that you might have all the answers. It's a worthwhile exercise to go through and investigate with someone, you know, what's being done. And the thing about this often is I've often actually then taken the time to realize, hey, there's differing training needs within the same organization. So maybe we don't want to do it the same for everybody. You know, maybe with this group, they want more time, and maybe this group, they don't really have a lot that like they're just going to be embracing this without a lot of questions, and it's going to go so much faster. So that's really helpful to know too. I think there was a question about
Yep.
virtual or in person. Um, the interesting thing is the needs assessment will usually help you identify what's the best way of doing that. And I'm going to use an example of ARMA Edmonton chapter at this point to jump in to answer that question. And Rick, I might need your help on this. So, about a year and a half ago, we as a chapter surveyed our membership and we asked them if they were ready to meet in person. It was like the pandemic was just sort of easing up. I'm going to use the word easing up because now I wonder if it's easing up myself, but it was easing up. And we actually surveyed our membership for Edmonton chapter to ask them if we could resume in person. And I'm hoping you remember this, Rick.
I
And what
do.
we got
I
as
do,
an
Don.
answer was no. We had people that were not yet comfortable for in person. Now, I know it's a different time, but this is the time we've all come through. And the time we've come through is people were not comfortable with in person and they wanted this format of webinars. And Rick, you kicked it off by talking about it again. You kicked off that this was the way that we were doing things.
Yeah,
So yeah, that was it.
that's
So
right,
Nicholas
Donna.
was just no was the answer. So now we believe that we're far enough past the pandemic that we would like to offer a basic records management course. And my team is very great here with ARMA Edmonton chapter, because the last time we did that was 2017 before the pandemic.
Mhm.
And the last time we did it, I went there and we did it more than once. And it was a 2-day course offering. And that 2-day course offering was in person, led by a seasoned practitioner. And what it was is we had a target audience of other people from various smaller communities, often municipal level, often like one person in the organization only, who off the side of their desk found themselves stuck to do records management. And not only did they need the content, but not like textbook content of learning the profession in 2 days. They needed to know where to go to get information. They needed to be introduced to the information that ARMA had, which was like a treasure trove. And the best part of the entire 2 days was seeing them connect. Like, and I would go over there at lunchtime. I'd go over there at coffee breaks. And there was it was quiet the first morning, but by after lunch, it picked up. And there's more dynamics of people connecting with each other. And the value of the training was the networking.
Isn't
The
that true
value
of
was
Arma though, Donna? That's been true of Arma since the 30 years I've been around in
right.
Arma. That's it. I mean, the
Yeah.
networking was always the thing.
Then they knew that they were no longer alone. Then they knew that if they had a question, so and so might be able to answer it. Then they knew that if they had, materials they needed to locate, ARMA had material for practitioners, and we also did promote AIM. Like there's no, conflict about promoting AIM or whoever you needed to promote. There was that willingness to make available for a practitioner, here's what you can do. And some of the solutions, I'll use the concept quick and dirty. Nobody has time for multi-year projects to answer questions. It's fast, it's done quickly, and it was solutions that would help them. So, those are the values of doing some stuff in person. And I don't think in person can ever be replaced by virtual easily. So I just want to bring that out.
Mhm. True.
So we had a couple of questions in the Q&A too that I don't want to miss as well. So would there ever be a time where training would be mandatory? My first reaction would be that some kind of certificate that's required for a position. Right?
I can give you a good example. So I was at Enbridge and we had a code of conduct. Okay. And it was mandatory. and it was to be read and it was to be signed annually. And it was about like a fraud, and it was about not being corrupt. And no, it's a great question, Troy, and it's a great thing. And they actually put the document in the learning management system so that it would track that it was done. And it was very easy to manage that way. Yes, you're reading this, you're signing this, and we're confirming that you're doing it. Now, it did not need like any virtual sessions. It didn't need, your boss was telling you you're reading this, you're making sure you understand every word of this, and then you're signing this virtually, and then we're keeping a record of it. So that it, and believe me, if there would have been discipline if someone had actually not adhered to the code of conduct. So that there is very much that kind of training. Some of the things I've seen for that mandatory training is things like Aboriginal awareness training. And I know that it's such a sensitive topic that I just question whether it's better to do it. If the person participating is not ready to attend, don't send someone not ready to attend. Make sure they're ready to attend and then have them go, because it does absolutely take away from the training of everybody. So when there's someone there, who's not able to be there, it really does change the dynamics. And the other part that really I've seen from somebody, one time something was kind of mandatory. A person felt they couldn't say no, but they spent the whole time working on their job while they were in the training. And I thought they shouldn't even be here. Like if they've got this deadline, if their manager knows they need to get this done, they shouldn't be here. They should be back at their office
Right.
doing a good job of this. They cannot be here working away, because they were sitting near me and I found it really frustrating that they were never actually paying attention to the class.
Counterproductive to everybody, isn't it, Donna?
It was, and he was right in the middle of the room, and it like great employee, absolutely, trying to do what he could, but it's not good. Now, great thing, Tanya. Yes, onboarding to the corporation. Yes. But again, going through that, like it's sort of like often when things are made mandatory, it's worth it to take the time to identify why they're mandatory. And maybe the word mandatory needs to be kind of, not the terminology we should use. We just want to make sure that people understand the value of it. We should make them want to be there without making them feel like they're being forced to be there.
One of the other questions here in the Q&A, what about the younger generation, the learners in the younger generation? We talked about adult, but as that kind of the newer, younger people are coming in, there's going to be a transition to that techniques and everything that we learned for the current older generation as a newer generation comes through. The
Oh, I think
adaptive.
it's huge.
Yeah.
I think we have no idea what's coming. And I say that with a 17-year-old daughter. So, and also the other part of learning is to understand how people learn. I'm a very visual learner. You see how I've got this on the screen. I love it, right? My daughter is actually a kinesthetic learner, which means she learns by doing things. So she struggled through the pandemic. She struggled with technology. I think the fact she's my daughter is a way for me to learn from her of what it's like and how painful it is when you don't learn this way. Like that's what she's taught me. Many of the people, like working for municipalities at times, many of the people that we have in some of our roles, like doing the garbage pickup, doing like recreational programming, the lifeguards, many of the people in those roles, I suspect that they're doers. I suspect they're kinesthetic learners. Like people that were great swimmers, I'm not sure that they were actually visual learners. So the challenge we are going to have for the next generation is doing better to actually do training that's not customized. The school system that was developed for, teaching in schools was for visual learners. And it fails to help people that don't learn well that way. So when you were doing training, we try to do it engaging everybody. And so therefore, to answer those kind of questions, like having opportunities to do group work, having opportunities to do activities that are, team building. One of the things, I was at the city of Wetaskiwin, and they did a staff training day last year at this time, and they actually showed how to put up a teepee. I have never seen that before. I was from the West Coast. we didn't really, we had longhouses, not teepees, but it was interesting to see how it went up and the science of that and the engineering of that. And I'll have to say, the engineer was grabbing the rope. One of our engineers was the first one grabbing that rope and just seeing how it was tied up there. And I thought, yeah, this is how it works for people that really jump in and do the work. And then some of our guys that were the operational guys, they were right there, absolutely engaged with it. And it went so much better than the storytelling of the morning, which was, for people that learn differently through auditory. So that was working well for certain people, but that opportunity to put up the teepee, that was a whole different learning way.
Mm.
And it was a way of engaging people. So as we develop our training, can we actually think about the needs of our audience? The other part, Troy, to that question is, I think that I've noticed that the attention span of younger people is unbelievable. I think that you've got like 10 or 15 minutes. And I wish that it wasn't that way, but I think that it will make it super challenging for a trainer to make their content engaging. For us in records management, this is kind of sleeper content, right? Like it's not that exciting. So we
I
have to.
don't know, Donna. I think it's pretty exciting.
So we're going to have to go into this with making sure that we are doing stuff to make sure people stay with us, right? Yeah, short bites, Courtney, you're right, you're bang on. Like developing planning for that. Like I know teachers in the school system have lesson plans. I think it's so crucial to have timed breaks. Make sure there's a lunch hour, make sure there's time to get away from the actual desk that you're sitting at, get people physically moving around. Like make sure you're doing engaging training. There's lots of materials out there for how to do this. It's just a matter of planning and applying it. And so, Troy, one of your questions on this sheet might be like, what is the characteristics of your target audience? Is there a lot of millennials in here? Generation X, baby, like are the baby boomers out of the organization? Like if it turns out that you've got a completely brand new group of people and they're all millennials, well, you're not going to spend any time talking about the shared drive. They don't even know what that is. So don't waste time on stuff that doesn't matter to the target, right?
Yeah.
Donna, I just wanted to say, just in case anybody out there is wondering, like you mentioned FOIP quite a few times in there. And of course, if you're from Alberta or Saskatchewan, FOIP is kind of a normal thing. But if you're from other provinces, FIPA would be your thing, or FOI, or
Access to information.
All equates to the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows what.
Yeah, you're right. And there again, I slipped it in, right? So but access to information, privacy laws, that stuff really does matter to us. And I think it strengthens our case because we have a legislative basis for the work we do.
It matters to most of our US folks right now too,
Yes, it
because
does.
all of the states are moving in a privacy direction as well. So, or many of them are.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that, Rick. That's why I have you guys to help me. Any other questions that you can see there, Troy?
Yep, a couple quick ones maybe. Who's the audience for basic record management training in a company?
Okay, so in a company, this goes back to what are your goals of the program? I really believe that you should be onboarding people to what is expected for them. And, maybe you do want like a video that message about, this, records management is important here from a senior executive level. And then you offer customized training to what they need to know. Depending on their role, I think that establishes what they need to know for basic records management training. That is a good question. It's a fundamental one. It just shows that someone's seeing this material for the value of it. I don't think you should have everybody sitting through a major course on records management if they really don't touch records. For example, the guy that's picking up garbage, how much does he touch records? The secretary that provides him admin support is a very important key member of the team in an organization and a business unit. She might be working with records all day long. That person needs a lot of training. They are a subject matter expert that needs to know their content a lot more thoroughly than someone else.
Another quick one. What are some suggestions for getting C-suite support to make training mandatory?
Okay, so you need to have a business case for why it would be mandatory. So what is about your training? And I think they want to see the value to the organization of the investment in training. So what is the value to the organization? And I believe there is actually a cost value that you could
Mhm.
actually make a case for.
Mhm.
That, you know, by doing this properly, we will have better compliance. We will have that people understanding their requirements of what they're needing to do.
Mhm.
And you can build out even putting a financial cost on what it is for when people are, you know, you can't find records, people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's confusion. It all creates problems down the road from the point of view of compliance and quality. I've been reassigned at one point to work on a quality management system for Enbridge. We could demonstrate that the time spent on giving people training and direction resulted in better quality, which it was, you know, improved our operations and improved our profit.
Yeah, yeah, true. Very, very true, Donna. It depended on the organization as well, and how all the things that are important to them. So looking at an organization's goals, looking forward into their goals in the corporate material is something I would probably start with is there and work backwards into what the ROI looks like from a training standpoint
Right.
for records and information management as well.
The other part of that might be too, if it's a regulatory organization, they can be shut down.
Yeah,
So if they don't
mandatory
want to have the
requirement.
record, great. You're putting yourself at complete risk at any time.
Yeah.
Somebody who's regulating you can come in and shut you right down and fine you, and it just goes on and on, right?
Particularly if you're utility, a water utility, gas pipeline, that kind of thing. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a lot of regular nuclear. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of requirements that have to be met.
Yeah, so on that point, I guess what happened for me at one point is I could see some issues and I went to the compliance guy and I said, you know, we have some gaps here. And then he kept saying, I think I'm, you know, I feel my heart constricting. He would say that to me all the time. And, you know, he says, I really feel like I don't want to talk to you anymore. But he was really on board to working with us. And so the stick came out and again, not made mandatory. But when compliance is standing next to you in a room, it
Mhm.
really does have some weight,
Mhm. Very true.
right?
Yeah. Yeah,
I
very
think
true.
that was all the questions. I hope I didn't miss any in chat, but there were a lot of other good points here while we were talking. So there's some good conversation in the chat about some of the earlier questions. But
Yeah, no, this has been just a great topic, Donna. I think just a great topic.
Well, I think it's a fundamental for change. I think that developing a training plan is an important part of things like a SharePoint implementation. It's part of your change management. And I think that as we go into this, we're at an exciting time where, you know, as we develop new systems and processes, we really want to be able to be effective. One of the things that really stood out to me is when Bruce Miller mentioned in Calgary that people have a 50-50 chance of identifying what is a record. It kind of broke my heart a little bit because we've spent years training records managers and people on records management. And when he thinks, and I believe he's got the data to back himself up,
Mhm.
that half the time they can maybe get it right, like 50-50 chance, that is heartbreaking. So can we do anything at all to maybe move that little bar up to a little bit higher than 50-50? Like, could we, you know, can we, like maybe getting to 60-40 would make me feel better, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying 100% chance they can do it right, but you know, and so what are we going to do so we can do a better job so that we are actually increasing that, you know, 50-50? Can we do something better?
Yeah, no, I hear you, Donna. It's like the age-old issue of trying to train any user group at all what a transitory record is in the first place.
Does it matter anymore?
Yeah,
Does it matter? I
I
don't know.
agree with you totally. It was like, how do we train these people? Well, I don't know. Like I don't think they'll ever understand what a transitory record is.
So then how do we set up new systems so they can just put it away properly and the system will help us with that
Right,
question?
right. Especially with the AI now bolted into a lot of applications or bolting into a lot of applications as well.
Yeah,
It's all about making it more automated and so users don't have to think about it much anymore.
right. And that goes back to the question and the concern of the 50-50 chance of getting it right.
Right, right, for sure.
It's too subjective. So how do we make it less
Yeah,
subjective?
yeah, and easier for the users to actually function. Yeah.
Yeah, we're thinking about these projects from the point of view of the user. So
Yeah.
we're running out of time. Like you heard from Rick, we've got the great conference coming up in the States for October. There's more Learn With Us coming, starting up for the year. And I understand that there's coming up to be a really good presentation that Troy is going to do on SharePoint. So that's coming out shortly. And
on the
Ken
Learn With Us.
Oldenburger did a great talk, and I know it's a kind of a repeat request from from his perspective of working with Nanaimo
Yeah.
on benchmarking. And it was an incredible presentation for anybody that saw it. Really great content, and I'm really looking forward to Ken doing that talk at the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Donna. No, I just wanted to, we're just about the top of the hour here, and everybody needs their time back for the rest of their day. So thanks, Donna, again. Thanks to the Edmonton chapter, and wonderful presentation and great topic. Thanks to all of you that came on today. I recognize a whole lot of the names on the list of people on the presentation today. So thank you for always being there and staying with the programs, the IM Canada Connect and our Learn With Us programs along the way here in Canada. Thanks for all of the US folks coming on today. We really appreciate you being here. We're all in this together, so really happy to have you today. And please sign up for the Learn With Us on the Western IM website if you want to be notified of all future things that are coming up in the training side. So again, thank you. It's a Wednesday. Everybody have a great rest of your week. And thanks again for everybody for attending and Donna for doing your presentation today. Thanks, Troy, for being the guy on the spot here to make it all happen in the background too.
Nope, it was great. Great presentation. I'll talk to everybody soon.
Yep. Thanks,
Right.
everybody.
Rick, can I
Bye
talk
now.
to you for 1 minute?
You sure can.
We'll hop off here and connect.